Hello. Have you ever wondered how transactions are auto-created from a particular transaction? So let's explore the possibility of using smart events in order to achieve that. So let me present to you the requirement here that it has to create an AP purchase invoice payable to a government agency for the tax part of an original transaction. In this case, is a purchase transaction, but that purchase transaction should still be payable to the original supplier. So in this, let's go through the assumptions, smart events that will be needed in order to achieve what we're trying to do. Smart events, one is to create um, AP purchase adjustment or AP adjustment, a debit memo, and an AP purchase invoice. And let's go through sample workflow while navigating through the system. So with the assumptions in here, we know that the original transaction is a purchasing transaction for a supplier, and we called it in the initial invoice, while the auto-created transaction is an AP purchase invoice that is payable to a government agency, right? And since the tax part will be deducted, right, on the amounts payable or on the amount payable to the supplier, then there will be an auto creation as well of another transaction, in this case, an AP adjustment, which is going to be a debit memo that can be applied against the AP transaction generated by the purchasing transaction to the supplier. And you will notice in here that during the smart events, you will see their mixture of hard-coded and merge fields for auto-created transactions, and we will be using this date to demonstrate. All right, so smart event in here. First one is the smart event that will create an AP adjustment. In this case, a debit memo. So that will be applied against the purchase order transaction because we know that the purchase order transaction is the basis of the auto-generated transaction. So in this case, this is applied against the purchase order transaction, and this is the transaction definition. And we know there's going to be an API, and that will be created on create of the purchasing transaction or original purchasing transaction. And we have here the logic or the syntax basically in order for us to achieve that. So this is highly documented in the developer portal, wherein you will notice in here that the dates, I've hard coded them like 10th of April 2025, and we have merged fields in here like the vendor document number, which is the AP purchase invoice number. We also have the base currency or, if applicable, transaction currency, and these are sourced from original transaction in this case, right? And other fields in there, I know that the tax account that will be affected will be this GL account in there. And I know that this transaction will just be for a particular location and department. So you can hard code the other stuff, which I think will just be um, specific to this transaction, or you can just source information from original transaction. In this case, again, the purchase order transaction, right? And it's up to you what will be the smart ID link in there. And another smart event that we have to create. So that firstly, that the other smart event is just to create the adjustment, AP adjustment. So that adjustment, the purpose of the adjustment is to essentially reduce the amount payable to the supplier by that tax amounts. So when we reduce the amount payable to the supplier, we have to create an AP adjustment, a debit memo, which can be applied against that original purchase transaction, because we know that the tax amount should not be payable to the supplier, but should be payable to a different supplier or a different entity. In this case, it's a government agency. That's why we have to create a smart event AP purchase invoice in order to create that part. So we already moved that tax portion, right, from the purchase transaction. This case, we have to recognize that amount, tax amount, that should be payable to the government agency, not to the original supplier. Okay. So, yep, it has to be on the, in our case, again, our original transaction is a purchase order transaction. And we have it an API as well. And event is add, meaning on create of the purchase order transaction. And yep, so same other fields in here. So vendor ID. So this is the vendor ID that I have is I know that that's the government agency. Supplier ID, that government agency, this amount, this transaction will be payable into. So I hard coded it, but you can get other information there like document number. In this case, I have the document number and I just put gov in there, just an indicator. So yep, it's up to you how you want to um, define that. And I have in here as well, like, again, we have the account number. This is the account number that will be debited primarily, which is the tax account, right? And yep, when it comes to name, it's just up to you how you would like to define it. In my case, I have this one, like an AP invoice payable to the government. All right, so let's have a look at the workflow just for us to see how it actually behaves. So I must say that when it comes to the smart event, you can have like particular criteria in there, like a condition that you would probably would like to have maybe a flag somewhere that it will be, you will probably be using the same transaction definition, but only certain types will trigger creation of an AP adjustment, a debit memo, and an AP purchase invoice payable to another supplier. In this case, is a government agency. All right, so okay. So let's have a look at this one here. So I have this purchase transaction definition. So let me just create um, a transaction just for us to see. So we have here, let me just choose a supplier. So I'll just date this back to 10th of April, because I have the smart event hard coded with the date, but you can define as well the year, month, and date, right? But I just made it, yeah, 10th, because simultaneously those transactions should be created with the original purchase transaction in this case, right? This is the transaction definition. Okay, so yep, I have it there. Test auto create 101, and base currency have AUD there. So I'll just be using this item. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to go through a purchasing transaction, but in my case, I just have the purchasing transaction as my original source document. So I'll just make it straightforward, 1000 in there. And yeah, one thing as well that I'm using like the Australia GST for the tax, but this one, it can be for overseas basically, right? But I'm just using the tax schedule or tax information for Australia GST just for demonstration purposes. Okay, so I have this amount payable to BNI Pty Limited, and I have this net amount, which is 1000 AUD, and it attracts a tax of $100, right? So ultimately, I am supposed to pay BNIT just by 1000. Yeah. So I should only be paying BNIT's 1000. The other payable 100, right, with tax amount should be payable to the government agency directly. Okay, so let's have a look here. So let me just post this. And it's already in there. Let me just have a look if I can still get the smart event logs just for us to see. All right, but I think that should be okay. So I have it here now. So let's have a look here. The purchase transaction definition. Let me just show you the impact in here. So we have this other expense for 1,000. The GST paid in here was being posted, right? Should be, maybe we should be able to get it from here anyways with the journal just for us to see the impact there. All right, so if I go for the accounts payable in here, 1,100, you will see that that is actually payable to BNIT. So which means that the entire amount is payable to BNIT, right? But what we're saying is that the amount payable to BNIT should only be the net amount. In this case, should only be 1,000, right? And 100 should be payable to the government agency. All right, so that's the purpose of this one here with the first smart event. It just creates an API adjustment. So let me just refresh it. So at the moment we have 64 records there. Let me just refresh this and see if that has incremented by 1. Perfect. All right, so I can see in here, you have the API adjustment, debit memo, which is great. Right? And yep, I'm just using the GST account in here or the tax account. So remember this one here, you have 100, and I defined it as well on the smart event that there would be no tax information anymore or tax implication. So I put no tax purchase. So I defined that on the um, smart event for AP adjustment debit memo. All right, so we have 100 in there. So you will notice in here that I've also mapped the AP purchase invoice number, which is this one. Just close this, that one there, or this one here, right? So I've already mapped it there, and I just put description as well for that. So we know that even if we have mapped the original, invoice number, in here on AP adjustment, the amount will not net automatically. So this will only apply right on actual payment. So we can just probably have a look as well later on. Or maybe we can just do it now. Let's see if I go to accounts payable, right? And if I pay AP purchase invoice, and let's look for bin ID here. All right. So yep, hopefully I won't have that one transaction there, which is great. Look at this one here. All right, so we have the amount due, which is 1,100, which is the original, which is coming from the original purchasing transaction, right? 1,100. But we have the smart event auto creating this one, AP adjustment, which is negative, 100. That's why we're seeing it as a credits available in there. And even if I line details in here, we can just have a look at the credit details. Yep, so adjustment, right? Adjustments, AP adjustment 0081. Is that the one there? Yep, perfect. That's the one, right? So when you process the payment, you can net those amounts basically, right? So we know that the amount payable to the supplier will just be 1,000 because it's like the original amount of 1,100 and we have the AP adjustment of 100. So that's why if we have 100 there, then amounts to pay will just be 1,001 or 1,000 rather. That's what we want to achieve. But then again, what we're saying is that if we have created an AP adjustment against the original supplier, the tax amount, which is corresponding to that AP adjustment, we have created an AP purchase invoice for the government agency. So let's have a look here. I'll just refresh this. At the moment, I have this number of transactions. And if I refresh this one here, I know that through the smart event, I hard coded the supplier, which is the government agency, which is tax office in this case, right? So this is the one. If we have a look, all right, okay. So just have a look this one. Yep, that's great. Yep. Yeah, just ignore the date in there. It's just a mapping basically that we have to map accordingly. But yep, this is the AP purchase invoice created as what you can see, right? This is payable against the tax office this time, right? So this is already payable to the government agencies. The 100 amount has been excluded through the AP purchase or AP adjustment debit memo, but it has created a new AP purchase invoice, but this time payable to the tax office. So, yep, so that's the beauty of having or making use of Smart Event just to auto create certain transactions. So, just to summarize in this case, the scenario is that we have the original purchasing transaction. Any tax implication will not be payable, to the supplier, but instead it should be payable to government agency or a tax agency. So what we did, we stripped off the tax amount from the original purchasing transaction into um, an AP adjustment, a debit memo. So that's why when you apply when you make the payment, then you can net off that amount. So meaning you can have the original purchase transaction less the credit generated by the debit memo. That's why you only have, in our case, like instead of 1,100, it's just 1,000. But then again, since we already stripped that off, then we've also created another AP purchase invoice. And this purchase invoice is payable not to the original supplier, but to the supplier that we just defined on the smart event, which is your tax agency or government agency. And yep, so when you can process this payment as well normally as your ordinary supplier. So yep, so hopefully that explains everything what we're trying to achieve, and we were able to show really the rich functionality of Smart Event just to address this particular requirement. Hope this helps. Thank you.